What's going on, animators? Welcome all. We're so excited to have you all here for our second episode of the CG RIFF podcast. And today it's my absolute pleasure to welcome our very special guest, Mr. Zach Parrish is in the house. We're so pleased and excited to have him join us for what I'm sure is going to be a great episode. We're going to hear a lot about his journey. He's been doing a lot of exciting things recently. He obviously has a long storied career up to this point, which we'll let him get into. But most recently was the animation director on Sea Beast, which is critically acclaimed and one of my son's favorites right now. He watches it constantly.
Hey, all right.
So probably on upstairs right now. But yeah, so let's get right into it. Thank you all again for joining. Thanks so much for hopping on, man.
Hey.
We appreciate you swinging by.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm excited to talk. This is gonna be fun.
Let's start at the beginning. That's typically a reasonable place to start. So, how about you tell the people out there, kind of how you got into animation, how you found your way to this career path, and some of what your career's been like so far. You could almost eat up the whole hour just talking that. You got a lot of credits to your name at this point. But we'll give us the
You're implying that I'm very old, which I don't appreciate. No, I'm kidding.
No, dude, you graduated a couple years after me, if I'm not mistaken. So
yeah, that's right.
Again,
that's right. Yeah, no, I mean, it goes way back. I mean, because for me, I think being an animator was basically what I wanted to be since I was. How old are you in first grade? You're like 6 or 7.
Yeah.
And I remember being in first grade, and the dare officer asking the class, "What does everyone want to be when they grow up?" And all of the other kids, were answering like doctor and fireman and, police officer or whatever. And I was like, I want to make cartoons. And I had no clue what that meant. But I had been to Disney World and I had seen that people drew cartoons, and I knew that was an actual job. And I didn't understand how it worked, but I wanted to do it. And so it was kind of a direct shot from there to where I am now. When I was in high school, I excelled academically, and so I thought I would go like pre-med and be a doctor and make lots of money. And then I saw Monsters Inc. In theaters, and that was it. I was like, nope, that is everything that I'm interested in as far as computers and art and animation from my childhood. And it's making me cry looking at a green ball with one eyeball, and this is absolute magic, and I have to do it. And so, much to my teacher's chagrin in school, I kind of abandoned that track and primarily focused on going to art school. And I applied to SCAD, where you and I met. That was when my junior year. So it would have been like 2001, 2002. I applied to SCAD and was accepted to SCAD before I even became a senior in high school. And then it was just kind of straight shot from there. I got hired at Rhythm and Hues directly out of SCAD. I was very lucky. I graduated on Saturday, started work on Monday. So I was super lucky. And then was there for 9 months, was at Sony ImageWorks for about a year, I think, 9 months to a year. And did Cloud with a Chance of Meatballs and Alice in Wonderland. And then was fortunate enough to get the last spot on Tangled. I heard Glenn Keane was making an animated fairy tale musical, and I was like, this is literally my childhood dream come true. And I got lucky enough to get that job, and I was there for 12 years. And then I just recently switched to Netflix and have been at Netflix for almost 2 years now, which is crazy because the 2020 time warp, I still feel like it's 2019. But there you go.
Yeah, right. Right. There you go. Yeah, I mean, so yeah, thanks for keeping that brief, but there's a lot of story, obviously, a lot of journey packed into those 90 seconds of intro. But one thing I wanted to ask you about, because I used to actually reference your name a lot when I was talking to students back in the day or whatever, because your journey from student at SCAD, making what's the bubble film and whatever you did, right? Your senior film, to animation supervisor on Ralph was so short. I feel like it's record time. I don't know anybody who catapulted into the stratosphere that fast. What can you kind of tell us about what that was like? I mean, I know that kind of as you left SCAD or maybe as you were finishing SCAD, you also did Animation Mentor, right? As they were starting up, right?
I did. Yeah, I left that out. Yeah.
Of that. Yeah. Yeah, and so that combination, I guess, really kind of put you on a very fast track, I'll say. Can you speak to what that was like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great point. I can't believe I skipped over it because it was such a huge part of my journey, because I started Animation Mentor while I was still at SCAD. And so I was pulling double time the last semester at SCAD. but it was kind of, it was bouncing balls and stuff like that, and only overlapped by a little bit. And then I started on Alvin and the Chipmunks at Rhythm and Hughes, and then I worked on The Incredible Hulk, and doing those movies, 10, 12 hours a day at the beginning of my career, and then going home at night and doing Animation Mentor was probably the craziest animation boot camp I could imagine, because I was animating probably, I don't know, 18 hours a day and hardly sleeping, but I was 22. And so I had plenty of energy.
Yeah.
But it was such a great boot camp because I got through SCAD generally understanding what I was doing. And I had a really good education there. And I had a good generalist education. So I understood, all the modeling and texturing and all of that, which was really helpful, but I didn't feel like I had quite honed that skill of pure character animation. And that's why I wanted to do Animation Mentor. And so I was sort of faking my way through it, but I kind of understood what I was doing. And then when Animation Mentor came in and had like very clear understanding as to the principles of animation, I was like, oh, that's what I've been doing this whole time. And then I could finally give notes on my own work. And that was actually, I think, what landed my first job was I said, okay, I know this reel is not great, but here's what I would do different if I were to do it again. Now that I understand arcs and spacing and overlap and all of these principles, I fully understand them now. And then doing little tiny chipmunks followed by really big, heavy creatures was also like a really good way to stretch myself. So by the time that I got to Disney, I'd worked on Cloud, the Chance of Meatballs and Alice in Wonderland as well in there. And so the spectrum of animation that I had done kind of was such a wide gamut that when I got to Disney, I knew it so well because of my childhood. I knew exactly what it wanted to be. And I felt like I had the tools to find that happy middle ground somewhere between Cloud with a Chance of Meatballs and Incredible Hulk was Disney style, that like kind of caricatured, believable, grounded reality. And so I was so hungry on Tangled. I was so hungry. I think I did like 5.5 minutes of footage on that movie.
I was going to say, I know you're credited, I believe, on that film, if I'm not mistaken, as Zach Laser Parrish.
Yeah.
You did a lot of footage on that film. You're very, very fast, I guess. As the adage goes. But
it was just that hunger. It was like if I could, I would have animated the entire movie myself because it was such a dream come true. And I understood the characters and I understood the aesthetic. And you had Glenn there as like this incredible safety net, and you were learning so much so fast. And so I think it was partially in part to how fast I was on that show, as well as some of the shorts that were done after that caught the attention of the supervisors, Renato, especially, who is going to be the head of animation on Wreck-It Ralph. He came to me and actually said, "Hey, I noticed that you didn't apply to be a supervisor." And I was like, well, yeah, to your point, like I'm too young. I'm too early in my career. I want to do a few more movies and get those under my belt before even thinking about that. And he was like, "I think you're qualified." And I was like, "Really? Okay." So I applied and I did the, interview process and all of that. And I got the job, and I give Renato an insane amount of credit because he's a really, really smart leader. And he always does a really good job of mixing seasoned talent with new talent and getting fresh voices in there. And I think that's really good to challenge senior talent, which I am now, to challenge senior talent and get them out of maybe ruts in their old ways of doing things, to think about new things, as well as just growing new talent. And so I was that risk that he took on that movie. And I think I did an okay job. I'm sure I made a lot of people mad because you inevitably mess up, your first time doing anything. And it was a crazy experience. But yeah, I think I don't even know, like 25 or something like that when I became a animation supervisor. So yeah, it was very fast. And then it's slowed down. The progression has slowed down since then, but it was cool.
That's a good point though, that you made that just, maybe by strokes of luck or whatever, the shows you've had touched at that point were so vastly varied from something like Cloudy to something like The Incredible Hulk, right? Choking out, Abomination or whatever type of thing. Just so you know, first of all, I'll state. I'm a huge Zach Parrish fan. I've been stalking you forever. I know all of your work. I think it's awesome that you still have even your student work up on the Zap My Shorts site, which is really cool. I think for people to be able to watch that whole journey, basically from mustard guy or whatever all the way through to
terrible student animation. Yeah, no, I think it's really helpful.
I know it's super cool. Yeah. Anyways, I was going to say that vast variety of styles that you got to touch really kind of made you, I'm sure very well rounded. But were there any points, I guess, during that show when you're finding yourself now as a 25-year-old animation supervisor at Disney, right? A few years out of school, that imposter syndrome sort of kicks in. Is that are you kind of dealing with that all the time?
Yeah, man. Like I've been doing this a long time, and I mean, I have a lot of confidence in myself and my vision. And I think that's partially, why I was on that trajectory as well. I have very strong opinions about performance and acting and things of that nature. And I'm fairly outspoken about that, but no matter what, no matter how high I get or how high anyone gets, I think, you still question, like, do I really know what I'm talking about? And the biggest moment for that was in pre-production, because I was a lead during pre-production. I was a lead on King Candy and Vanellope until Tony Sneed became available to take over Vanellope, and then I stayed on King Candy. And I was tasked with tasking Eric Goldberg with doing a 2D animation test for King Candy, as well as Bruce Smith. And it's like, holy crap, and like they told me, like, hey, so Eric's all done. Bruce did his, I think he was like working remotely or something, because I think he was on another project at the time. And so he did this amazing test that was super cool. But Eric was in the building, and they were like, hey, Eric's done. He's ready for notes. Go down to his office and go give Eric Goldberg notes. And I was like, what the hell am I going to say to Eric Goldberg? And I went down there, and he showed me his animation, and I was like, this is great, Eric, thank you. And I think I like gave him the most awkward high five of my life, and that was basically it, because I was like, what am I doing here? Like, everyone here is so talented, and then even giving notes, to fellow animators, or Clay Cadis and John Cars, who are the animation supervisors on Tangled. They came on to Ralph and were animating shots, and it's like, I mean, here's what I think, but like, I don't know, tell me if I'm right or not. It's sort of like having your teacher check your homework. So yeah, but that never goes away. And so even, working on Sea Beast, you're like, I'm pretty sure this is what you should do, and here's what I would do, and this is my gut. But there's always a chance you're wrong. And there's always, because it's such a collaborative art form and there's so many moving pieces, there's always question marks, and there's always going to be multiple ways of doing something. So you can't be super definitive. And because of that lack of anything definitive, that imposter syndrome is always going to creep in a little bit. Yeah.
It makes sense. Awesome. So let me back up a little bit, because cool. Like you mentioned, you and I crossed paths at SCAD, and our other than being in the same major, of course, in slightly different years, we were both also RAs, and I've actually met a lot of animators that were RAs, and I find that people who worked in the dorms as resident assistants in any capacity tend to have a certain there's a certain personality that gravitates toward that type of work while you're in school. And, there's some leadership involved and good like peer mediation and all these types of things. Do you think you already possess some of those types of kind of leadership skills before even kind of finding your way in the field as a professional animator?
Well, I didn't have any real leadership experience before that. I think I'm kind of a natural leader in the sense that, like I said, I have very strong opinions. I'm fairly outspoken. I'm a massive introvert, and so it's a little bit of a performance to some degree of trying to assimilate and trying to fit in. But I'm not afraid to speak my mind. And there's actually one story in particular in regards to being an RA that was the first time that I ever understood that I had that skill set, or that I might be interested in it. And it was actually my freshman year when I was learning about being an RA. And, I'd heard about it, and they were taking applications or whatever. And they were like, come talk and do like a mock interview if you're interested, and see if it's something you actually want to do. And so I did this mock interview, and I don't think I'd ever really interviewed for anything outside of like, I worked at like a a bingo hall when I was in high school, and that's not like a real interview, and so I did this mock interview, and at the end they were giving me feedback on that conversation. They were like, it was really good. You were really good at eye contact. You leaned in. You had this presence that like made us want to like be on your team. And I was like, oh, I never even thought about that as a quality, let alone something that I might possess. And so, but I wanted to be an RA because I liked the idea of community. I had a really good RA when I was a freshman, and it made that transition of leaving home so much easier and so much more fun. And so I wanted to be able to provide that for others. And I actually was an RA for 2 years because I enjoyed it so much my sophomore year. And most of my residents actually returned to the dorms to be on my floor again, which was fairly unheard of. And I was like, oh, this is cool. I like getting a group of people together and kind of orienting them and being that kind of that shoulder to lean on when they needed it, or advice when they needed it, or just to be there to play video games, which is most of what I did as an RA. It was like playing Halo with my residents. But I really enjoyed that. And so from the time I got into the industry, like I said, I never thought I would be a supervisor or a head of animation or a director or anything like that. I never thought I would even get a job in the industry, period. But as I got into it, it just felt natural to me. And I like that feeling of seeing somebody else succeed. And, I think a lot of people struggle when they become supervisors with not getting to do the craft as much anymore. And I miss that too. And I'm getting to animate some more now, and that's nice. But I genuinely enjoy seeing people grow and get better. And it's much like, you and your teaching, like you get so much emotional support from that. And I love getting to see people grow and get better and hopefully have fun and hopefully enjoy their work and be proud of what they did. And so, I don't think I can ever not be a leader, in the future.
Yeah, it makes sense. So let's, I guess, continue your progression, right? So you're a supervisor on Ralph. What was the path from finding your way from there to head of animation on Big Hero 6, which is huge, right? That's like the next step, right?
I know, it was wild because it was Wreck-It Ralph and then Frozen and then Big Hero, and so Frozen was only the movie at my time at Disney that I didn't work on, and right after Wreck-It Ralph, we had a bit of downtime. That was back when the movies were a little bit more spread out. The teams were a little bit smaller. It's not like the crazy town of animation studios today. I think there were only like 45 animators on Tangled or something like that. But after Ralph, Patrick Osborne and I we both applied, and we did not apply together. I don't think, if I remember right. I think they came back to us and said, we're interested in you guys as a team. And we think you'd be a really interesting pair. And we were both like, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. And they said, why don't you guys go off and then come back to us with a pitch on what it would look like with you two as heads of animation. And so we put together this like massive, like 30-page document on our theories on animation and how we would want to run a show and the department and what we saw for the movie and how we would divide tasks and all of this. And it was probably way overkill because we got the job. And then I think it was about 9 months later is when Pat got selected in the shorts program to make Feast. And so he left me. And honestly, they weren't really sure about me. I had a conversation with the producer, which it's changed hands. Producers changed hands over the course of that movie. But the first producer, I had a meeting with her, and she said, to be honest, we don't think you can do this. And I was like, well, that's cool, because I'm going to. And she said, we think we need to put somebody else with you. And I said, that's fine. I'd be happy to work with somebody else. And then they couldn't quite make it work with the other shows that were happening and everything else. And so they came back and were like, never mind, you're going to do it by yourself. And I was like, awesome. Well, I'm glad you told me you don't think I could do it. But it was cool. I mean, it was really hard. I think I was the last one to do it solo. It's been two heads of animation ever since, because it's a massive, massive job. And like I said, I probably made a lot of people mad on Wreck-It Ralph, kind of failing my way through that. I know I made a lot of people mad on Big Hero 6 because I was young and I I didn't have the full context, and I wasn't emotionally mature as I am now. And I was hungry, and I was, impatient. And so I'm sure I made it tough for some people, but I really was trying to push the medium as much as I could, to push us as a studio as much as we could, to push technology as much as we could. And I learned a lot, and I think we all learned a lot from that show. And so it was a really good first experience, and I'm glad I kind of got my butt handed to me on that movie, because it was awesome, and we won an Oscar, so that was cool. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you can. A little hardware never hurts. Yeah. So I think I have a couple things I wanted to ask about Big Hero 6, because I'm a big fan of that. So I rearrange my Funko based on who my guest is today. So we have Ralph here. And we have Baymax up there. I have my Baymax. You can see him. There's my Big Hero 6. There we go. Yeah.
So
I think I wanted to ask about a couple things, because there's I'm not even sure who did it, but there's a popular test that flew around the internet for a long time, and I show it to my students all the time when I'm talking about character specificity. Is where they all come in, each character comes in and sits down in the diner. But what can you tell us about that? Or were you involved in that? Was that like some early pre-production stuff, or what? Like, I think it's such a brilliant test, and it so beautifully illustrates character specificity that to this day, many years later, I always pull that up and show my students. It's like, this is how, something as simple as this, but so well done. It kind of really makes the concept very clear to a lot of students. Can you speak about that test at all?
Yeah, I can, because it was my idea. So that's awesome to hear. And I animated 2 of the 8 tests. It was a conversation that had started with Pat and I before Pat left, because one of my many soapboxes that I like to stand on is about character specificity and getting animators to try to get into the same skin, when they're switching between characters and really living from the inside out. And so Pat and I had talked about it, and he was working. I think he was actually working on Feast when we were talking about it. He was still we were sharing an office still. And we basically said, okay, what if you could describe your character with an animation curve? What would an animation curve look like? And for Honey Lemon, it would probably be something with a lot of energy, and it'd be kind of bouncy, and it would trend upwards, and and then you'd have Baymax, who would be kind of slow and even. And if you can use descriptive words to describe a curve, then you can probably use a descriptive word to describe a bouncing ball. And so I had all of the supervisors who were leading on their characters do bouncing balls that they thought represented their character. And we actually made a walking lineup of those balls. And then we just kept going. Okay, well, if you can use those words to describe a bouncing ball, then you should be able to use those same words to describe a walk cycle. And most of the time, that bouncing ball kind of became the hips to some degree, or the general motion of the character. And so I was the lead on Go-Go. And so my descriptive words, I think, it was like powerful. I don't remember what the words were, but effectively it was that. It was like fast, powerful, but still soft underneath. And so I wanted some amount of like squashy, stretchy nature to her, but I wanted like a driving force to her walk. And so we did this walking lineup, which was another like technological thing that I wanted to do. I wanted, as a show, we never get to see our characters in pre-production all on screen together, and to see how their designs balance and how their look balances and all of that. It's always in shot work, and then there's lots of redos. And so I wanted to avoid that. And so we did the walk cycle thing, and then I said, okay, now we're going to do it. Everyone's going to animate a test of a very simple thing, and they walk in and sit down. That's all they have to do. And I'm not going to give you any more direction from that, because you've lived with this character long enough now. You should be able to do it in the way that only that character would do it. And they all came back with such strong animation. They're amazing animators. All the supervisors in that show are incredible animators, but they all came back with such specific choices, and they knew how to communicate why they were making those choices, because they had been forced to kind of think about who they were in that way. And then they could communicate it to the animators about why they made those choices and who their character was. And I think it really did help. And I think it shows to some degree on the show as well, that specificity. But we knew we needed to do it, just because that movie was like 8 main characters. And we were like, how are we going to make sure that these characters stand apart from one another? And so yeah, it was really fun. I got to do Go-Go and I did Baymax because Pat left, and Pat was the lead on Baymax. And so I took over Baymax, and that was super fun. Awesome. I loved animating Baymax.
Very cool. Brilliant. Yeah. I think that, like I said, to this day, that still is one of the most clear examples of like what specificity is for people who are starting out and just don't even get it or understand. Love
Thanks,
it.
Man.
Awesome.
Cool.
And then the other thing I wanted you to speak on briefly, you actually did some, I guess, surprise animation for the team, right? On that show. They didn't know you were doing, right? Undercover, right? What, can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was super cool because Chris Williams, who was the director on that movie, and the director of Sea Beast, he snuck into my office one night because I was working very late because I worked insane hours on that show. And he stuck into my office one night and he was like, "Hey, so I have this idea." He's like, "But we don't want anybody to know." And I was so excited about it. But we had, I think we had like 3 weeks to do the whole thing. It's Stan Lee turns out to be Fred's dad. If anybody hasn't seen it, stay through the end of the credits. And there's a little scene where Stan Lee turns out to be Fred's dad. And he's a superhero. He's a secret superhero. And I was so excited to get to animate Stan Lee. And it was like such a dream, such a Marvel dream come true, you know? And so I tried to animate the entire thing myself. And I eventually broke because I was doing, because we were still working like 12, 14-hour days getting animation done. And then I was staying for like 4-6 hours after work trying to animate. And I was breaking, and it was coming up against the wall for lighting. And so I pulled in a few of the supervisors and they each did like 2 or 3 shots. But I think I got to animate like 75% of it, which was really cool. And it broke my heart that I had to let them in on the secret, but they kept it a secret. And it was really cool because at the wrap party, everybody's like clapping. You can feel the clapping winding down because it's the end of the credits. And then that came up and the whole place like, whoa! And it was great. And it got crazy applause and stuff. So it was a cool gift to get to give to the crew.
That's awesome. Really, really fun. Yeah, I love that. And I think it was awesome that they were able to work a Stan Lee cameo into that because it's at the end. Yeah. First of all, shame on you, anyone who hasn't seen it yet. These shouldn't be spoilers, right? But yeah, you watch that long and you almost forget like, oh, there was no Stan Lee cameo. And then that they worked that in there was really cool.
Yeah, it was one of his last speaking parts. I think he had like 2 or 3 more after that. Before he passed. But yeah, it was awesome. I'm so proud that we got to do that. And again, modeled and rigged and everything like on the fly at the very end, when everybody was so tired. Very proud of the team. Yeah.
Sweet. So let me transition. I know there's more shows or whatever in between, but so your next, I guess, kind of leadership progression, right, is into directing, right? So yeah. What can you tell us about Puddles, sure. the short circuit program, and how you got involved with that?
Yeah, so that one's kind of complicated as well because technically it was for the old like shorts program under John Lasseter, where anybody in the studio could submit a short idea. They had to submit 3 short ideas. And then they kind of narrowed it down based off of, I'm not exactly sure who narrowed it down, but they narrowed it down. And if you got into the final 10 short films, then you got to present to John. And Puddles was one of the final 10 when John pulled the plug on the shorts program at both Disney and Pixar. And so kind of as like a consolation prize, they were like, so we're gonna start this new program called Short Circuit, which I had actually been proposing for a while, but my pitch on it was more of like an R&D, to try out new technology and try out new techniques and looks and stuff like that. And they were like, we're going to do the shorts program, and 6 of us got to make them. I think there was 1 that wasn't ready, and 3 of them were short-term hires or something like that. There was some weird rule, but 6 of us got to make them. And so Puddles got turned from like a 7-minute story idea into a 90-second story idea, which I decided to just do kind of a teaser because it's tough. It's really tough to tell a full story in 90 seconds. That's effectively a commercial. Yeah. When I see a commercial where I'm like, ooh, that's a good story. That's incredible. Telling a short is hard, period. Getting stuff down and to its essence and every shot being so important is hard, period. 90 seconds is insane. but it was really cool because it was a super small time frame, super small budget, and but it was an opportunity for me to kind of feel like I was back at SCAD, because I had to wear a lot of hats, because you have such a small amount of people who get to work on it, and you have to do it so fast. I got to get in and do some modeling and some look dev, and I previs the whole thing, so I kind of skipped layout to some degree, because I did, instead of doing boards, I previs the whole thing. And it was really fun. It was my first time having to talk about characters that hadn't been defined yet. Because there's one thing to the character specificity stuff on Big Hero 6, but it was how to illustrate an idea of a character that somebody else had already written and given voice to. These are who my characters are. This is why they think the way they think. This is what they think about one another. And so it was really good to have to flex that muscle, and to learn how that extra level of communication, because so much of directing is just, it's talking, but also listening and understanding where people are coming from. And it's going back to the whole RA thing. It's like trying to guide kittens, in a direction. And so it was really fun. And, I got some great designs from Yvonne, is he at Pixar now? Is Yvonne still at Pixar? No, I think he's at DreamWorks now. He was at Pixar for a little bit. Oviedo, yeah.
Yeah. He came through very briefly. I think he was on Lightyear for a little bit.
Yeah, I think because he loved Presto, which we can talk about another time. But he loved Presto. But he did some great designs, and so it was really fun, because I got to go through the whole process too, because within a pipeline, like I said, I had a generalist education from SCAD, but like I hadn't been deep into every department in that way. And so it was good to build those relationships, understand, every department uses different dialogue, everyone uses some people use the same words in different contexts. And so it was a really good education for me. And it was fun to get to tell my own story. It was fun to get to just make something. But we never thought anyone would see it. So the fact that it's on Disney Plus is kind of wild, because the point at the beginning was just like, here's a small budget, here's a small amount of time, go make a small thing. You'll show it internally at Disney, and then you'll go back to your job. Oh. And so it sat on a shelf for 2 years, because Disney Plus wasn't a thing. Yeah. It was just like, hey, I made a short circuit and that was cool. And that was it. And then Disney Plus needed content. And so they released us on Disney Plus. Oh, okay. And that's why I think there's 12 episodes or something like that. That's over the course of like 2 years that they made all of those shorts. But it's a great program. And, you have directors from every department and every discipline. And so it's really fun to get to jump in and help out. I got to do previs and animation and all different kinds of stuff for people in Short Circuit, just because you need anybody who can or is willing and has the time to jump in and do stuff. And so it really felt fun and collaborative, like a student film. And I loved that about it.
That's awesome. Yeah. You kind of tap into that like scrappy, just grabbing friends who can help, type of thing. We have a similar thing with the Spark Shorts, exactly. For Pixar, same type of program. But that's awesome. I'm glad it found the light of day. I went back and watched it, in preparation for this, because I hadn't seen it in a bit. I saw it when they first released on there, but I went back and watched it, and it's, in a way, it almost feels like a teaser trailer to Strange World. Like when they go in there and like the big eye comes up, the whale or whatever, and they're like standing there looking at stuff floating through the air and stuff. I'm like, oh, there's actually some kind of like echoes of like precursor to Strange World in some ways, which was interesting.
When I saw Strange World, I was like, wait a second, I feel like this is familiar. And also the production designer Merdad on Strange World, he did the painting of that big final scene of kind of revealing the puddle world.
That makes sense.
Which originally it was something completely different in my head. It was kind of a budgetary thing that made it what it was. We were making Moana at the time, and because I wanted like all these fantastical creatures, like original creatures flying through the sky, and it was like, no, we can hardly make the two characters that are in your short. And I was like, okay, what do we have? And so I'm like digging through the repository. I was like, we have a lot of fish and stuff. I was like, okay, there it is, And so my giant monster turned into a whale, and it worked, So
Nice.
it was
Yeah,
cool.
you got to be resourceful.
Yeah, you do.
I love working within constraints sometimes because like a lot of creativity is born out of out of those constraints,
Absolutely.
as budgetary or
Yeah,
otherwise. But
the scariest thing for me is a giant open box because like I can do
yeah,
anything.
yeah.
I like to have some limitations. Yeah.
Sweet. So that brings me to, perhaps one of my favorite things that you've made recently, Us Again. And I remember when it first dropped, I messaged you. I'm like, dude, this thing is so good. I've watched it 5 times in a row and then went on to watch it many, many more times. I can't think of another short in recent memory or at all that I've watched as many times, except maybe Jerry's Game back in the day,
Oh
studying
yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
Us Again, it's so much
Thanks,
fun,
man.
such good energy and vibes, so well done. There was a time here where we would start basically every weekend with putting on Us Again because it's like a palate cleanser for the vibes in the house. So we're still working fully remote in
Yeah,
pandemic, and
yeah.
I'm down here working in my office. And I come upstairs, put on Us Again, the music's going, my son's dancing, and then it's ready for the weekend vibes, right? Just
Oh, that's
really really
awesome,
fun short.
man.
I love the concept, love the music. It's all just brilliant. What can you
Thank
tell us
you.
about how that came about, how you got selected for that, and this one obviously was a longer form
Yep.
short and not part of the Short Circuits project, and was, if I'm not mistaken, the first short they had done in a long time, right?
Yeah.
And of like a proper short, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Since John ended the shorts program in whatever that was, 2015 or something like that. It was the first one, and they actually selected me and Natalie Norrigot, who did Far from the Tree, which came out, I don't know, 6-9 months later.
The 2D one, yeah, or 2D looking one,
2.5D, yeah.
Yeah.
They selected us at the same time, and we went into development at the same time because they wanted to bring back the shorts program. They wanted to do it slightly differently. In that they wanted to choose, instead of the old shorts program was anybody could pitch an idea, and it was the best kind of idea that John liked would kind of make it to the top. And they wanted to do it differently, where they wanted to select people that they wanted to kind of help train toward becoming maybe a feature director someday. And so I was honored to be considered that person. I was a workflow supervisor at the time. I had spent the last year and a half, 2 years as a workflow supervisor, kind of post Puddles. I did that. And so that was also really good, education on how we make our movies and how the departments work and what they're looking for. And I actually came up to Pixar and saw you guys and learned Presto. And that was during Incredibles 2, I believe, was when I was up there. And so it was a really great time for me to kind of challenge the preconceived notions on how our movies are made. And so I think I was selected a lot for that. I think Puddles was helpful, but I think it was also because I was, trying to push on how we make our movies differently. And so I got that opportunity, and it was crazy. It was, Jen had just started as CCO. And Tracy had just started as the head of development. And so everything was kind of topsy-turvy at that point. And they wanted to run it like a feature pitch process. So they had us pitch a minimum of 3 ideas. I think I pitched 4 shorts. And Us Again was the short that was selected. And which was my favorite of the 4. Us Again was the one that I was like, please pick Us Again, please pick Us Again. And because I had it pretty well formed in my head from the beginning. It was probably the most comprehensive pitch, as far as I knew the kind of music I wanted. I knew the kind of lighting I wanted. I knew the look of picture I wanted. I knew a lot of what I wanted. I thought I knew what I wanted to say. And I think as far as what I learned in the process of making Us Again is how massively important theme is to your film, and how deeply you need to understand it as the director, and how personal it needs to be, and how you need to find your deep connection to that message. And because it's not different. What the end product is and where I started is not different. But I think I was a little bit too surface level with how I was approaching, it's about me and my struggles, with getting older. And it's like, okay, what else? And it's like, what do you mean, what else? And so it was a lot of the development process on that was really trying to dig into what am I afraid of, and why am I here? And what did my parents say, or my grandparents say, or what happened to me societally that causes me to even have this this train of thought. And that led me to talking to people who don't think like that. And that's where Dot, his wife, was kind of born out of that idea, because originally it was kind of both of them wanting this, and the reign being taken away from both of them. And so the idea of a couple who have different views on aging was born out of that. And I think so much the emotion of the film kind of comes from that exploration. And so, as much as I hate the trust the process, it did bear fruit in that way. And so it was a massive learning curve making that film, and it was so hard and so emotionally draining. But I love it, and I'm so proud of it, and I can't believe I got to make it. Like, I still look at the dance stuff of Keone and Mari and just go, I can't believe they let me like hire my favorite dancers and like get them to dance for me. Like, it's mind boggling that I got to do that. It was so much fun.
So that's what I was going to ask. So you were already like a big fan of their dance and their dance style, and familiar with all of that, and that kind of, as you were shaping, I guess, the pitch and the idea, that was already a big part of it, right?
Yeah, it was a big part of my pitch, because it was sort of like, I see, I was trying to tell them, like, I see this world where everything is dance, and the only way that I can describe to you how that will work in a story is by showing you this. And I made like a hypercut of their dances, because I was like, they can do fights, they can do love stories, they can do happy moments, they can do sad moments. They're such great storytellers and amazing people. I learned later, but I never thought I'd get to work with Keone and Mari. I always thought I would get to hire somebody and I would tell them to emulate Keone and Mari.
Like,
but it really did help people. Every time I showed it, I'd be like, see how they're fighting here? And people would be like, oh, okay, I kind of get it, because it was such an abstract concept. It wasn't a normal narrative. It was this like, they're going to dance at each other and that's going to say everything. People are like, so they're going dancing? It's like, no, they're not going dancing. They're just living their life, and their life is dance. And so everyone who came on constantly were like, okay, so they're going to go ballroom dancing? It's like, no, they're not going dancing. And for a long time, there was a scene in a dance club, and eventually I had to take that out, because I realized how much it was confusing people, that like, wait, why would people in a world of dance go to a dance club? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so that was part of the kind of that story process. But yeah, they were foundational to the whole idea. And so the fact that I actually got to work with them was ridiculous, because I'd been fans of theirs for, God, I don't know, like 5-10 years. So yeah, it was awesome.
So do you personally have like a musical or like a dance background, anything like that, or just a big fan?
No, just big fan. It started, my freshman year of college was when So You Think You Can Dance came on TV. And it was, I'm a big mama's boy, and it was a thing I did with my mom. She loves dance. She used to take me, we would go to plays and stuff. I think it's another, reason why I'm an animator. She would take me to local theater. We'd drive to Chicago to go see plays and musical theater. And I've always loved musical theater. I did some when I was a kid. But you can hear me. I don't have a good voice. I can't sing. And I can't dance. But I love it. And to me, it's sort of like animation. It's an exaggeration of real life. And to me, I know some people don't like musicals and they don't get it. To me, it's like a deeper, even more emotional version of storytelling. It really hits me in my soul. And so I knew I've been wanting to do a dance short for so long. I remember pitching it to Don Hall back on Big Hero 6, even the idea of a dance short. And he was the one who encouraged me to like, keep digging into that. That sounds interesting. And so Us Again was that old. And so when I finally got the opportunity, I was like, I have to, please pick this one. So I was happy that they did.
That's awesome, and yeah, the opportunity to bring to fruition in the way you would want to, with the actual dancers that you wanted, it is super like inspirational and exciting. That's so cool. Awesome. Yeah, I mean, I think you and I have a lot in common in terms of that. Like I have some musical theater background. I love musicals. I'm always like boo to those people who act like they're above musicals and don't like musicals or whatever, because I'm a sucker for all of them. I love that stuff. That's like my whole childhood basically. Yeah. But so now So a lot of people, right? You had a kind of, like I said, sort of a into the stratosphere career trajectory, right? From
Yeah,
from Jump Street. A lot of people, it takes us, myself included, a more kind of circuitous path to like finding their way
sure.
to the feature animation studios and whatnot. And if that's the case, for those people, a lot of times you hold it on this pedestal for so long, and it's this kind of dream type of thing. And it's hard for them to understand why or when a person would ever leave one of those types of jobs or transition to something else. So I want to get into what was it like for you to know that it was time after having gotten some directorial opportunities and all these types of things. Uh, how did you know, or what was the circumstance, I guess, that let you know that it was time to move on from Disney, which is the pioneer of this whole industry, right? In a lot of ways, or in every way, really. What was that like for you to kind of come to that realization that it's time for me to move on and explore some other opportunities? How did that come about?
It was really hard. I loved my time at Disney, and but I definitely knew that I want to continue to direct. I still want to continue to direct, and that line was very long at Disney, and as it tends to be, because everyone, like you said, Pixar, Disney, DreamWorks, Illumination, like those big studios, like everybody wants to do it. And so supply and demand says there's only so many jobs. And so I knew it was going to be a long road, and Jen said as much. And so that was kind of the first thing where I was like, well, maybe I should think about this, as far as leaving. And so I had started thinking about it. That was it. And then I hadn't planned on leaving, but it was in the pandemic. So we did Us Again from home. And I got a call from Netflix, and they said, "Hey, we have this movie with Chris Williams, and he's saying you're the only person that can save his movie." And I was like, "Well, that feels awfully nice. Sure, I will." They're like, "Will you meet with Chris?" And I was like, "Of course I'll meet with Chris. Like I worked with Chris on Big Hero. I worked with Chris on Moana. Chris is like the nicest human in the world. I'd love to meet with Chris and find out what he's doing." And so I met with him, and he pitched me Sea Beast. And it was awesome. And he had like a full-size ship that he like brought into the camera, and a model of Red and stuff. And he talked about how, it was something that he didn't feel like he could make at Disney. And he was excited about the opportunities at Netflix and kind of the no holds barred that they kind of offered to him. And that was really enticing and really exciting. And, I had been at Disney for 12 years, and I was excited at the opportunity to do something different, and to stretch a new muscle. I get very ADD. And so that's why I think I had 5 or 6 different titles or jobs at Disney in those 12 years, from supervisor to head of animation to director to workflow supervisor. Like I'm constantly popping around just because I love everything about making movies. And I knew because it was Chris, it was going to be an awesome movie. He's such a ridiculously talented filmmaker, that I knew it was going to be something special. And so they let me see the screening, and I thought it was pretty awesome. It was very similar to the final product, because of the amazing previs that was on that movie. And so it kind of became a no-brainer for me, as hard as it was to leave Disney, because it was my home. I was there for 12 years, and I learned most of what I know at that studio. And so many of my friends are there, and I bawled my eyes out. Fortunately, no one was there, because it was middle of the pandemic when I had to go clear out my desk, and nobody was there. And I walked the halls and cried the whole time I was there, because I was like, what am I doing? I am an idiot. Why am I leaving Disney? But it was awesome. And Sea Beast was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was super fun and really rewarding. And I am happy I got to work with Chris again. And it's opened up new possibilities at Netflix. And I think Netflix is in an interesting place right now to do. They have no defined style, no defined history, nothing. And so that means they can do anything. And that open door is the most exciting thing for me right now. And while I love Disney, it's a known quantity in my brain, and Netflix is is the Wild West, and there's an excitement in the point in my career where I'm at, because now I'm an old fart, like you.
It happens.
So it's exciting to see, what else is out there and how I can support different teams going forward, or maybe direct, or maybe be anim direct, or whatever it is. I'm just excited to get to impact as many movies as I can.
Can you talk briefly about? I think I heard you mention on another podcast how enormous the crew size of animators on Sea Beast was.
Yeah,
right? Can you talk about that, and what is that like dealing with a team that large compared to? I mean, you mentioned on Tangled, you guys were only like 45 people back then or whatever on that show. But what is it like to have a team of like 200 people? Basically,
insane. It is absolutely insane. I never thought I would work on a crew over 100, because Big Hero 6 was 95. Including like myself and the supervisors and Mark Henn. We were 95 people, and I was like, this is not how you make a movie. This is terrible. Like, it's so stressful. It's so much mental gymnastics. And so then I met Josh Beveridge, who was the head of animation on Spider-Verse. And he was like, we had 188 animators. And I was like, that's insane. Like, I don't know how you're still alive. Sea Beast, I think we were 2 or 3 short of that. I think we were like 185 or 186. I'm not sure. Wow. But we didn't beat Spider-Verse, but it was still an insane amount of people. There's probably animators that I never even got to meet because of just the way it works. I hope I got to meet them all, but I certainly recognize most of the names. I think all the names in the credits, but it was a lot. It was a lot to try to keep track of, but it was also when you get to a crew that big, especially, at a studio that does vendor work like ImageWorks, you also end up working with a lot of people where it's their first job, either in the industry or period. And so it was partially directing and talking through acting and where the character's coming from, and like, well, the camera's here, you're probably going to want to stage it, blah, 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 like more like the technical almost stuff. And then there was a lot of like animation 101, how lip sync works and squash and stretch, bouncing ball overlap kind of basics. But that was fun too. It took a little bit of time to kind of get up to speed on where everybody's at on their journey of animation, because every animator is at a different place, no matter how long or how short they've been doing it. They're all at a different place. And so you start to get to know people, and you start to get to know how things work. And I was super lucky that Josh is a rock star, and he was leading the team on the ImageWorks side. And they had, I think, like 14 leads, and they were all also awesome. And so it was a lot to organize, and there were lots of frustrations and lots of fights and things like that. But everybody was really cool. Everybody was really respectful and really professional. And when I say fights, it was heated arguments, not fights. You know what I mean? And it was really hard, because Chris is also a really hard director. Not in a he's a jerk kind of way, but he's really good, and he knows what he wants, and he has really high expectations of every aspect of his film, and he knows what he wants everywhere, and is really good at articulating it, and therefore nothing passes mustard without being exactly what he wants. And so it was very trying, and with that many people, it was very trying, but it was fun. It was rewarding, I guess, to get to help that kind of crew, to kind of be the North Star kind of person to that type of crew, and that talented of a crew. They were really good.
Yeah, it came out awesome. I was really impressed with the quality overall of every aspect of that film. I really enjoyed. Would you say that there was anything about, and I know it's a lot of years in between, but about your time at Sony on Cloudy or Alice in Wonderland that kind of made you sort of privy or like understand their workflow or pipeline or anything like that at all in any useful ways, or was that kind of too far removed to be?
No, it did actually. I remember my time at Sony really well, and obviously things have improved tremendously with their tools and pipeline and stuff like that, but they were still using the same like image viewer tool and stuff like that. And I think also having a little bit of compassion for what it's like to be in a vendor studio and to try to make it feel more like a vertically integrated studio, because I think from my experience, less so on Cloudy, but more so on Alice in Wonderland, VFX and vendor studios can sometimes be treated just like gears. And that depends on the show. Some shows are great and some shows are tougher, and it depends on the leadership from the client side. And Chris is an incredible leader and makes you feel like you're part of a team. And he also spent 25 years at Disney, and so he's used to that kind of team feel. And so I remembered kind of what it felt like to be on a not so fun show. Cloudy was an incredibly fun show, and my time at Disney, they were fun shows and good teams. And so we tried very hard to try to make sure the vibe in rounds and dailies and stuff like that was fun. And we encourage people. It was pandemic still, so it's all, Zoom meetings. And so we encourage people to turn on your cameras and talk to us. Like, otherwise I'm just shouting notes into the void. And then it starts to feel like client vendor. And that's not fun. That doesn't feel like we're making a cartoon, like it should feel fun. And so I do think that that little bit of time that I spent at Sony helped in that regard, as well as just kind of understanding, their tools and pipeline, stuff like that a little bit. But I wasn't allowed in. I couldn't touch their rigs because I was on the client side. So there was like a little bit of safe distance that I had to keep.
Okay. Yeah. So to that point, let me, I guess, ask, what was it like in terms of, so, I mean, you've been in kind of leadership positions for a while now, so I don't imagine you find a ton of time to do any animation yourself. I mean, we mentioned, the secret thing on Big Hero 6 or whatever. Yeah. Do you, is that a muscle that you still kind of get the urge to flex, or are you kind of more comfortable now on the directing side, and are you finding opportunities to kind of do a little of both here and there?
Yeah, I'm actually super lucky, and partially it's because of my speed, in all humility, that I get to jump in on stuff like that every once in a while. Even when I was a workflow supervisor, I animated on Frozen 2 and Wreck-It Ralph 2, just kind of on the side, just like, hey man, kick me some shots. Like, I miss it. I love animating. I love animation. I got into this to be an animator. And I've gone the leadership route and I've gotten to direct, and I love that too. And I want to continue to do that, but I just love animation. I love modeling characters still. I'm doing look on a character for fun right now. I really, really enjoy everything about it. And so, I animated on Raya full time because that was kind of post Us Again? Yeah. After Us Again, I worked on Raya, and I did some of the silly Olaf shorts, which were super fun to work on. I didn't get to animate on Sea Beast, which I really wanted to. I asked them if I could, and it was like a union thing that I couldn't touch the rigs. But so I didn't get to animate on that. But then ever since Sea Beast, I've joined James Baxter's team at Netflix, which is like a really, really small character animation support team, which is called Cast. But our job is to basically help shows that have just been greenlit to help kind of define their animation style, help them work out their character designs, and set them up for success when they go to work with the vendor studio. So it's sort of like a bridge between like a vertically integrated studio and a vendor client relationship. And the reason I joined that team was A, it'd be more box time. I miss animating. I love animating. And B, it gives me the opportunity to work in lots of different movies. And because like I said, I love making movies. And so the idea of getting, like, you might get to help 6 movies in 1 year and jump into different styles and jump into different characters and stuff like that. I get so much energy from jumping in and trying to solve something, or trying to imagine something, or helping somebody else kind of realize what's in their head. And so, so that's all I've really done for the last year since Sea Beast is that. And so it's been all on the box. And actually right now I'm deployed to a movie. I'm actually working on a movie for Netflix at a vendor studio, just animating shots. So it's fun. I get to do all kinds of weird stuff. Yeah.
No, that's good that you're not letting that get too rusty or whatever, right?
No, yeah, definitely not.
Awesome.
I mean, who knows? That's somebody else's. Somebody else can judge how rusty I am. I mean, I feel pretty good.
So we've mentioned it a couple times up to this point, your speed. So I'm sure for all the animators out there, I'm sure there's people who are interested in just hearing. Can you briefly kind of describe what do you think is the I would assume that your speed is tied to having a very solid workflow at this point and a way of approaching shots. What would you say is kind of the secret to your speed to go like the Samson route, or what? And I guess could you
it's my beautiful long hair.
You had longer hair in college, as I recall, right?
I did, yeah. I had a mop, yeah. I don't know. I've been asked that a lot in my career. And partially it's like a really dumb answer of like, I click buttons really fast. I played a lot of video games as a kid. But I think one thing is decisiveness. And I don't say that like I have all the right answers. I think it's a choice whether you second guess yourself or if you just kind of close your eyes and jump. And I think I have fairly good instincts, and I try to understand where the directors are coming from and what the point of the shot is and what the message I'm trying to communicate is and where the character's coming from and going to. And I have a pretty good grasp on that. And then I kind of just trust my gut, and I shoot some reference and I do a couple thumbnails and then I just go. And because I have found that throwing it out and starting over is typically faster for me if I miss than trying to finagle my curves and all of that. And so I've learned to just kind of trust my gut and just jump in. And so that's kind of on like the more philosophical side. And then on the more, I guess, technical workflow side, I mean, my workflow is, I feel, fairly ubiquitous at this point. A lot of people approach their shots in a similar way, which is I always shoot reference. I love that part of it. A lot of Sea Beast was me going, hey, can I shoot some reference for you? Just because I love embodying the characters. Maybe it's that little bit of theater that I got to do as a kid. But I love that part of it. And then I also, especially when I'm animating my own reference, I know how to translate that because I know what I wanted myself to do when I was shooting my reference versus what's on the screen. And so that conversion process, which, sometimes I think that's a learning curve. And I think part of it takes a little bit of vision to begin with, but I retime my reference to exactly what I want to get kind of the cartoony, maybe timing, depending on the style of the show. And then I very quickly go through and steal a bunch of poses. And then I delete the reference, retime that, break it down. And it's just kind of mostly forward edits. I was going to say all forward edits, but I obviously use undo all the time. It's just like, it's just keep going. I just kind of keep pushing ahead, trusting that it will work out in the end. And if
mostly a pose to pose guy, or like step blocking or like layered, or
I used to be stepped only. And as I've gotten older and maybe lazier, I don't know, or more confident, I'm not sure. Now I'm a lot more layered. And a lot of time, I always thought it was crazy when I would hear Pixar animators, especially work layered, and like, what are you doing? How do you know what poses there's going to be? And they look at me like I was insane. But now that I've gotten a little older and I trust my acting instincts, depending on the shot, I will work layered. If it's like a simple head and shoulders talking shot, layered. If it's a big action shot, I'm stepped. I usually will do, and there's videos online about this too. I'll do like a bouncing ball or a bouncing box with a head. And that's actually how we did Us Again. I prevised Us Again we called it Cube Viz, where I made little face replacement boxes where I could do different emotions on the boxes. And I laid out the entire short with boxes. Just because I think it's really good at capturing the energy. It's sort of like that bouncing ball thing from Big Hero 6. I guess it's just how my brain works. You can capture the energy.
You were one of the first people. You were one of the first people I saw do that, and I actually ended up folding that into my workflow as well. I think you had done like a a demo lecture thing for Anim Squad or something at some
Yeah,
point. And yeah, just using like the shapes to just get the basic energy and stuff figured out. And I kind of teach my students to do that, especially on complex shots.
exactly.
Which it seems like even way early on, you had a penchant for very complex shots. I remember the
Yeah.
long crazy shot in Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs during the
Yep.
storm, and he's running and like all this stuff. And then a lot of the Flynn Rider stuff you did, and Tangled, of
Yep.
course. So your ability to kind of bring these really complex things to the screen with relative ease or seeming ease, you make it look easy at least, right? I'm sure
Banging my
there's
head
a lot
on
of
the desk. Yeah.
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 There's a reason your hair is shorter now, right, than it used to be, I'm sure. But no, I think that's really cool for people to hear, just how people approach, and then even how that workflow sort of, can progress or evolve, I guess, over the course of your career. Because I've had sort of a similar thing as well, where, starting out very post to post and then kind of figure out, that there's kind of maybe quicker ways to the same thing
Yeah.
you're trying to get on the screen. But
yeah, cleaner. The box thing, I think, is really, I think some people do it, but they don't quite, because I see student tests and stuff like that online where I'm like, oh, okay, they're doing it, but they're not quite getting why it's there. And I think the idea, the reason to do it is less like something for a progression reel. I feel like some people do it just to be like, see, look, I use the box thing. It's like, but then you see they're blocking it, like has nothing to do with the boxes at all. And I think there's two things. I think one, it's like a good thing just to kind of work out the scene so if the camera's going to work, because then you have a little bit more confidence in your staging. But the second thing is the way I like to work, and maybe it's partially the layered approach now, is it's dealing with the information you have to put into the computer or on screen in bite-sized chunks. And I'm just focused on timing and energy and kind of the overall choreography of characters and camera. And then I can move on to poses, because I don't want to have to try to figure out all of that energy and choreography stuff while also figuring out poses. I'm like, I'll tie myself in knots and I'm going to go nowhere and the animation's going to be garbage. I need personally, because I don't know, maybe I don't have enough faith in myself. I don't believe I can do it. I need some kind of help. I need some kind of guideline. And so that's why video reference helps, or a story or a drawing pass. If it's a really cartoony shot, I have to have that. I have to have my video reference. I have to have my box, so that when I'm posing, I'm not trying to figure out everything at the same time. My brain will break.
Yeah. That makes sense. All right. Well, in the interest of time, we're sort of coming to the end of our time together. But I want to just hear, I guess, from you any kind of final thoughts regarding, where do you see your career going from here? And I think you touched on it a little bit, that you're interested. You enjoy the director's chair, these types of things. What are the types of things you hope to see out of your career as it continues to progress? And then also, if you just have any kind of closing thoughts in terms of the state of the industry, are there things that still excite you about animation, or that you're hoping is kind of the next frontier, or anything like that? Just any kind of parting closing thoughts regarding any of that.
I mean, I'm still very optimistic. I mean, I think it's easy to be a bit doomsday right now with the dawn of AI and everything. I guess I'm still fairly optimistic. I see it as a tool. I think it will be a part of our lives going forward. I don't think there's a way around that. And I'm trying very hard not to be, that old guy saying, well, back in my day, and refusing the change of technology. I think it'll be a tool, and I think we will use it to not do some of the stuff that I hate doing in animation. You know what I mean? Like, I would love for it to like auto polish my shot if I could get it to do that, because that's the part where I'm like, I got the idea. I don't want to do that anymore. So I think it's still, I think there's a lot of positivity there. I think the dawn of streaming, while it's been kind of rocky up and down as of late, I think in general, it's a good thing. I think there's more content to be made. I think that's a positive thing for my aspirations as a director, but also my aspirations as an animator. So many more people are getting to make things, and that is going to force a diversity of voices, a diversity of styles, a diversity of everything. And that makes me excited as a viewer, and it makes me excited as an artist, and it makes me inspired to either get my own voice out there or to help other people get their voices out there. And so I think in general, it's a great time to be joining the industry. there's a lot of jobs and a lot of big crews out there now. And so that's awesome. And I do hope I get to direct. I think, next step, I would probably like to co-direct. I think directing a feature film is such a huge, huge undertaking. And directing a short film was really hard. It was really hard. And that was 7 minutes. And so jumping to 90 is a massive jump. And so I think the idea of taking the skill set that I have, which is a little bit more production focused, and partnering with somebody to either bring their vision to the screen or working together to bring our collective vision to the screen, would be awesome. And then maybe I'll stay there as a co-director. I like the collaboration of animation. I think that's the best part of it. And so maybe I'll just be a co-director forever if I can find the right people to work with, or maybe I'll direct something of my own. I don't know. Or maybe I'll just be an animation director for Chris Williams forever. I don't know. All of those sound like great options. And so I'm happy that all of those options have potential. Yeah.
Well, I think this is a great place to wrap it, but I can't thank you enough for stopping by. I think all of that is just so inspiring, and we're proud of you. But yeah, I think it's just been such a exciting career for you to this point so far. Watching you has been really exciting. And yeah, I think the sky's the I guess you're already at the sky, but I guess the space is the limit for,
That's right.
for you.
That's right.
Yeah, so we're excited to keep an eye on you, keep in touch, and see what's next for Zach. But again, we were just so appreciative of you coming by, sharing your heart, sharing some inspiration to all the viewers out there. Thank you all for tuning in and listening, and we'll see you next time here at CG Riff. Take care.
Bye, everybody.